John Dewey is a very prominent educational pioneer who founded the theory of progressivism and has had a lasting influence on today's teaching practices. John Dewey was born on October 20th, 1859 in Burlington, Vermont. He is the third of four sons. Unfortunately, the eldest of the four sons, John Archibald Dewey, passed away when he was an infant. The second of the four sons, Davis Rich Dewey, was older than him by 1.5 years. And the fourth son, Charles Minor Dewey, was younger than him by 1.5 years. John Dewey's father, Archibald, came from a farming family. He moved to Burlington and got into the grocery business. After being in the grocery business, he decided to become a Union Army soldier in the Civil War. After the war was over, he became the owner of a tobacco shop that did very well and allowed the family to live a comfortable life. He also loved to share his passion for British literature with his children. John Dewey's mother, Lucina Rich, came from a very wealthy farming family. Her family moved to Shoreham, Vermont, about the time his father's family settled in Burlington. She was a devout Calvinist. Dewey grew up attending Burlington public schools. He always did very well in school. When he was 15, he enrolled in the University of Vermont and studied philosophy. He especially enjoyed studying philosophy under H.A.P. Torrey. He graduated second in his class. After Dewey graduated from the University of Vermont, his cousin helped him get a job teaching at a high school in Oil City, Pennsylvania. When his cousin resigned as the principal, Dewey lost his job teaching there. So, Dewey went back to Vermont and began teaching at a private school. John Dewey married Harriet Alice Chipman in 1886. They had 6 children together: Evelyn, Frederick Archibald, Gordon, Jane Mary, Lucy Alice, and Morris Dewey. Harriet was very supportive of anything that Dewey did. She even became the principal of an elementary school that he established in Chicago. Sadly, she passed away in 1927. John got remarried to Estella Grant in 1946. She was a widow as well as a longtime friend. They originally met when Dewey was working in Oil City, Pennsylvania. They were married until Dewey passed away in 1952. After Dewey received his doctorate in 1884 from Johns Hopkins, his career as an educational psychologist began at the University of Michigan, where he was hired as an assistant professor. In 1888, he and his family moved to Minnesota, where he was a professor of philosophy at the University of Minnesota. Within a year, they moved back to Michigan, and Dewey taught at the University of Michigan for 5 years. In 1894, Dewey became the head of the philosophy department at the University of Chicago and stayed there until 1904. While he was there, he also served as the director of its School of Education for 2 years. In 1904, Dewey became a professor of philosophy at Columbia University. While he was there, he also worked at the Teachers College. Dewey retired in 1930 with the title of Professor Emeritus. Dewey was very inspired by the writing of a philosopher and psychologist named William James. Dewey was a huge advocate of progressivism because he believed that education should be based on learning through doing. He believed that children learn best when they learn through their own experiences. He was also a proponent for pragmatism, which focuses on applying ideas to real-world scenarios. Dewey also supported instrumentalism. Since he believed that learning occurs when people experience something, he viewed ideas as tools for experimenting so that future experiences can be improved. Dewey had a strong belief that education should focus on students' interactions with the world around them, and alongside his wife, started an experimental primary school to put his educational theory of progressivism into action. The school was known as the University Elementary School and was at the University of Chicago. However, when Harriet was fired as the principal by the university president, Dewey resigned. Then, in 1919, Dewey, along with some of his colleagues, founded the New School for Social Research, which also focused on putting his theory of progressivism into action. Jane Addams had a huge influence on Dewey and the development of his theory of progressivism. Dewey was very interested in the Hull House because he saw it as a place where all different people came together and were able to live together. The Deweys visited the Hull House pretty often and became very good friends with Jane Addams. One of the fascinations that Dewey had with the Hull House was that the democracy among the people there was so evident. He saw that democracy was a way of life, not just something used in politics. Seeing the democracy among the people at the Hull House deepened Dewey's beliefs in it and gave it an even greater meaning. Like I mentioned earlier, Dewey was 87 when he got remarried to Estella Grant in 1946. Since Dewey retired in the 1930s, they lived off of Estella's inheritance and his book royalties. Even though Dewey was retired, he was still an active member of many educational organizations. Sadly, in 1952, John Dewey passed away of pneumonia at the age of 92 in New York City. John Dewey has a huge influence on current teaching practices. Dewey was a huge believer in students interacting with their environment, which leads to much higher levels of engagement throughout the lessons presented. He also thought that it was very important for students to see how what they are learning relates to them. So making the curriculum relevant to students is vital to their successful learning. He also thought that reflecting on one's experiences was key to creating better future experiences. Dewey's belief that students need to interact with their environment also included the other students. He thought that children should interact socially with one another to further improve their learning experience. Having inquiry-based learning within the classroom is also vital to students developing practical life skills since they are experimenting with the world around them. Having the hands-on interaction with their environment allowed for them to experience learning instead of being told about what they should learn. It is extremely important for teachers to be familiar with Dewey's work for several reasons. First, teachers need to understand that they need to create engaging lessons for their students, and they can do this by creating lessons that are relevant to their students' lives. This helps students become more interested and invested in what they're learning. Second, teachers not only need to have their students reflect on their learning, but also reflect on their teaching. By doing this, teachers can determine where they can improve and create even better lessons for the future. Third, teachers need to have democracy within their classroom because this can lead to an even more positive classroom environment by incorporating all of the students in the classroom. This way, they can demonstrate a mutual respect for each other and show that they are willing to listen and understand why their peers have the views that they do and still cooperate with each other. Last, teachers need to understand that they are facilitators of learning. They are there to help students experience learning and help them inquire about the world around them.